At Thanksgiving, my sister stood up, tapped her glass, and announced like she was accepting an award. Mom and Dad are signing the house to me. Emily gets nothing. The room erupted cheers, whistles. Someone even yelled, "About time I didn't clap." I didn't blink. I just smiled the way you smile when a storm hits, but you already know the roof is theirs, not yours. I set my fork down. "Dad," I said softly, "should I tell them, or will you?" His face drained. My sister froze. And in that moment, everyone knew something was coming. Before I take you into what happened after that silence, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? It helps to know there are people out there who've lived through families like mine. My name is Emily Nolan, and if you'd met my family before that Thanksgiving, you might have thought we were close. The kind of Midwestern picture people post on holiday cards, matching sweaters, smiling in front of a tree, pretending we never raised our voices. But families like mine don't break in loud, obvious ways. They crack in silence, in small choices, in who gets listened to and who gets ignored. And for as long as I can remember, I've lived in the quiet space where people only notice you when they need something. Jenna, my younger sister, never knew that space. She was the favorite, bright, loud, full of charm, the kind of girl relatives fawn over at gatherings, calling her a natural and a spark. I didn't hate her for it. I just learned early that I'd have to build my life on my own because nothing was ever going to be handed to me the way it was handed to her. Growing up, I watched my parents pour attention into Jenna like she was a plant that needed constant watering. Dance classes, summer camps, private lessons, things I was told we couldn't afford when I asked. Later, when I moved to Chicago for work, they called it selfish, like choosing independence meant I was abandoning them. Meanwhile, Jenna stayed close, visiting every weekend, sliding into that perfect little mold they'd carved out for her. Still, I kept coming home for holidays. For my grandmother, mostly. Evelyn Nolan, sharp mind, silver hair, the only person in the family who looked at me with real pride. When she hugged me at the door, it didn't feel like an obligation. It felt like being seen. She'd tap my cheek, whisper something like, "You're stronger than they think," then slip back into her chair, like she hadn't just given me enough fuel to last another year. This Thanksgiving felt strange before it even began. The air in the house was different. Thick, expectant, like everyone had been let in on a secret I wasn't meant to hear. Mom was darting around the kitchen with that tight smile she wears when she's hiding something. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes for more than a second. Jenna kept brushing lint off her dress, even though it was perfectly clean. And when I walked into the dining room, I noticed one more thing. An empty chair next to mine was missing. Not moved, not pushed aside, gone. I should have known then. You'd think the empty chair would have been enough of a warning, but in my family, the signs are always quiet before they explode. I sat down anyway, smoothing my napkin across my lap, pretending not to notice the way conversations dipped every time I entered the room. They'd go flat for a second like someone had pressed mute, then pick up again with forced laughter the moment I passed. Jenna floated around like the star of her own parade, checking the table settings, fixing angles on the centerpiece, whispering little asides to Mom that made them both smile. Every so often, she'd look at me with a tight-lipped grin, polite but hollow, like I was a coworker she barely tolerated. It wasn't always like this. For a long time, Jenna and I were just two kids, sharing a bedroom, passing notes under the door when we were supposed to be asleep. She used to braid my hair, steal my sweaters, beg me to drive her everywhere once I got my license. But somewhere between high school and adulthood, something shifted. She slipped comfortably into the role my parents built for her golden girl perfect daughter, while I slipped quietly out of the frame. The house situation started 6 months earlier, long before the announcement at Thanksgiving. It was a humid Saturday in June when Mom called, asking me to come home for something important. No details, no warning. When I arrived, they ushered me straight to the dining table, the same table where everything would later fall apart. Dad had a folder laid out like a presentation. Mom smiled too hard, like her face hurt from stretching. "Sweetheart." Dad began, "We're refinancing the house. Just a simple signature. Better rates. You won't have to worry about anything." Even then, something in me tensed. My family never asked me for help unless they needed more than they were willing to admit. I flipped through the papers, heart thrumming as I tried to make sense of the numbers. Something felt off, too many pages, too many amounts blacked out, too many rushed explanations. "Can I take these with me?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "My lawyer can look at them." The silence that followed told me everything. Mom's smile faltered. Dad snapped the folder shut too quickly, like he regretted putting it in front of me in the first place. "It's just a formality," he insisted. "Why complicate things?" But I took the folder anyway. Back in Chicago, my lawyer flipped through the papers, eyebrows rising higher with each page. She didn't smile. She didn't stall. She called me the next morning. "This isn't a refinance," she said. "It's a transfer of liability. If you sign, you're responsible for their debt." Debt? I'd stared at the phone numb. What debt? She explained slowly, carefully, a second mortgage, months of missed payments, foreclosure letters, things I didn't even know existed. And the moment I understood, something inside me locked into place. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, something steady. 2 months later, Dad called again, this time asking for money. Not a loan, not help, money. He said it was for Mom's medical bills, but when I offered to pay the hospital directly, he crumbled. The story shifted. The truth leaked out, late payments, deadlines, desperation. And now sitting at that Thanksgiving table, watching Jenna glow under everyone's attention, the weight of those 2 months pressed against my ribs. They weren't giving her the house. They were giving her the debt, and they expected me to sit quietly beside her while it happened. By the time November rolled around, the secret sat between my parents and me like a live wire. We did not talk about the papers I refused to sign or the call where Dad admitted the truth. Our conversations shrank into weather updates and questions about work, as if small talk could cover a crater. They did not know I had done more than refuse. I pulled the property records myself. I knew about the second mortgage, the interest eating them alive, the foreclosure clock already ticking. They were drowning and trying to drag someone else under with them. At first, I thought that someone was always meant to be me. I was the one with the stable job in Chicago, no kids, the person they saw as a safety net they were entitled to. Saying no to them was like learning a new language that tasted like guilt. Then Jenna started posting hints online, captions about big changes, photos on the front porch with our parents, jokes about being ready to be a homeowner. Every post felt like another piece snapping into place. A week before Thanksgiving, Mom called to gush about how excited Jenna was to host more often once things were settled with the house. She said it lightly, as if the house were a gentle heirloom, not a bomb they were wrapping in a bow. That was the night I stopped hoping they would fix it on their own. I went to my desk, pulled out a folder, and started filling it. Copies of payments overdue, notices the summary pages that showed exactly how deep they were. I did not plan to humiliate them. I planned to make sure no one could say they did not know what they were walking into. On Thanksgiving morning, I drove back with that folder in my bag and a knot in my stomach. Part of me still wanted to believe they would pull me aside, admit the plan had gone too far. Instead, Mom met me at the door with a tight hug that smelled like perfume and strain. "You look beautiful," she said. "Jenna is going to be so happy you're here." The way she said Jenna, not we, told me everything. Inside, the dining room was set. Extra leaves in the table glasses shining, every chair filled but mine. My grandmother caught my eye from her usual spot and gave me a small nod like she knew more than she was saying. As I slid into my place, my hand brushed the edge of my bag. Paper against canvas. Proof against denial. If they were turning this dinner into a performance, I was done playing the quiet extra. When my sister rose from her seat and tapped her glass, I already knew I was about to watch the curtain lift on a performance they'd rehearsed without me. Jenna stood there, glowing, her hair curled perfectly, the necklace our grandmother gave her, catching the light like it had been chosen specifically for the moment she was about to steal. "Mom and Dad are signing the house to me," she announced, her voice bright enough to carry across every plate and every glass. "Emily gets nothing." The room erupted before the meaning had even finished sinking in. Cheers, loud claps, a few whistles, and the kind of laughter people use when they think they're supporting something good. Someone actually slapped Dad on the back. My mother dabbed the corner of her eye like she was witnessing an engagement. I didn't touch my glass. I didn't even blink. I just looked at Jenna and smiled. Not wide, not warm. The kind of smile that holds the weight of everything you aren't saying yet. Then I lowered my fork onto my plate and asked Dad, should I tell them? Or will you? The effect was instant. It was like my words cut a wire. The room dropped into silence so heavy I could hear the radiator tick. Dad's hand slipped. His fork hit the plate with a metallic clatter that echoed. Jenna's expression pinched. Tell us what... Around us relatives leaned forward, scenting drama. My grandmother exhaled sharply, as if she'd been waiting for anyone to stop pretending everything was fine. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and placed it in front of me. I didn't open it yet. I just let it sit there, resting like a quiet threat. Before you celebrate Jenna getting the house, I said calmly, you should probably know the condition it's in. Dad tried to recover. Emily not here. Why not, I asked. You weren't embarrassed when you decided to sign it over to her without telling her about the debt. Heads turned. Conversations died. Jenna stiffened like someone had pulled a string tight inside her. What debt, she snapped. I finally opened the folder. A stack of payments bills and overdue notices stared up at us. I slid one page forward, the summary line in bold. They're behind on payments, I said, on 2 mortgages. The second one was taken out without telling anyone. They're months from foreclosure, maybe weeks. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Dad reddened. Jenna blinked like she'd been slapped. That's not true, she said, her voice rising. They would have told me. Did they tell you, I asked, eyes steady on hers, that the house comes with over $100,000 in debt? That if you sign those papers, you're responsible for every overdue payment and every penalty? Something cracked in her expression. Doubt crept in. Dad tried again. You're making this sound worse than it is, Emily. We're handling it. Are you? I held up another page. Because this one says the bank isn't convinced you're handling anything. He lunged forward as if he could snatch the paper out of my hand right there in front of 20 witnesses. I pulled it back before he could touch it. Stop, Mom begged. Please, don't do this today. Why not, I asked. You chose today. The relatives started shifting in their chairs, some uncomfortable, some newly curious, a few openly furious at being included in this spectacle they hadn't been prepared for. My Aunt Diane was the first to speak. Daniel, she said sharply, is this true? Dad didn't answer. His jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might crack. Mom buried her face in her napkin. Jenna looked between them and me. But they said the house was mine. It was never a gift, I said softly. It was an escape route for them. They needed someone to carry the debt. First they tried to trick me. When that didn't work, they chose you. Jenna stood frozen in her sequined dress, shaking. Her fiancé Tyler leaned away from her slightly, like he wasn't sure if he should be associated with any of this. Is she lying? He asked my parents. Mom sobbed. Dad didn't look up. That was enough. Tyler pushed back his chair and stood. You told me the house was paid off. You said we'd have a clean start. Jenna reached for him, but he stepped back. You expect me, he said, voice trembling between anger and disbelief, to start a life on a sinking ship, Tyler. Please. He shook his head. I'm not marrying into this. The room gasped collectively as he walked out past the turkey, past my stunned parents, out the front door without looking back. Jenna's legs gave out. She dropped into her chair, hands shaking mascara smudging down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. This isn't my fault, she whispered. I didn't know. I know, I said, quietly. Dad slammed his palm onto the table. You ruined everything. I stared at him. No, you ruined everything the minute you tried to hand your debt to your children like it was an inheritance. You're tearing this family apart, Mom sobbed. It was already broken, I said. I'm just refusing to keep sweeping the pieces under the rug. A murmur rippled among the relatives' agreement, disappointment judgment, the kind that stings more because it comes from witnesses who saw everything. My grandmother stood slowly, using the table for balance. Her voice, though thin, carried more authority than anyone else's. I taught you better than this, she said to my father. Your daughters are not lifeboats for you to climb into. Dad shrank. Mom wept harder. Jenna finally looked up at me, eyes hollow. What do I do now? The question hit deeper than she meant. Not because I had the answer, but because she was finally asking the right person, not the parents who built her illusions, but the sister they'd pushed aside. Before I could speak, someone knocked on the door. Hard. Every head turned. The knock came again louder. Dad frowned. The door opened and a woman stepped inside. Plain suit, badge clipped to her belt, calm, unreadable expression. "Mr. and Mrs. Nolan," she asked. "I need to speak with you regarding your mortgage records." The room erupted again, this time in a wave of disbelief. Mom nearly collapsed. Dad went white. Jenna grabbed the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. I didn't move. I just sat there breathing slowly, watching the truth finally land where it belonged. "Why is she here?" Dad whispered, voice cracking. The investigator didn't blink. "We received a report of potential financial misconduct. I have a few questions. You could have heard a pin drop. Not one person cheered now. Emily," Mom sobbed. "Tell her you misunderstood, please." I didn't answer. Not yet. Because the truth was only beginning to unravel. When the investigator stepped into the house, everything that had held my parents together finally snapped. She asked calm, measured questions about payments, overdue, notices, the second mortgage, and each answer they avoided made the room feel smaller. Relatives drifted away from them like they were stepping back from a fire. Jenna sat motionless, her hands shaking in her lap. She wasn't angry anymore, just emptied out like someone had drained the color from her. My grandmother stood behind her, resting a hand on her shoulder, steady and silent. When the investigator left with the documents, the house fell into a heavy quiet. Mom tried reaching for me. Dad muttered that I'd embarrassed them. Neither apology nor blame landed. I picked up my coat. Jenna whispered, "Don't go. I'll still be here," I told her. "Just not for their lies anymore." In the weeks that followed, everything shifted. My parents were forced to confront what they'd built layer after layer of secrecy, excuses, and debt. The house went up for sale. They moved into a small apartment across the city, quieter than they'd ever been. No more grand announcements, no more golden child illusions. Jenna started therapy. She called me often sometimes, to cry sometimes, just to sit in silence on the phone. She told me she finally understood why I stopped letting our parents speak for me. As for me, I learned something I should have known years ago: telling the truth isn't betrayal. Hiding it is. And families built on denial always collapse eventually. If you've ever had to stand alone at a table full of people who claim to love you, tell me where you're listening from. And after hearing my story, what would you have done? They called me the charity case before I even sat down. I heard it from across the table, not whispered, but clear enough to sting. The chandelier light caught every smirk, every glass raised in pretend grace. Monica leaned back in her chair, voice sweet and sharp. "This table's for real family, not for foster beggars." Laughter rippled through the restaurant, polished and cruel. I felt my face heat, but my hands stayed still. Then the waiter came laying a $2,900 bill in front of me like a dare. I slid my card across the linen, one quiet motion that changed everything. People said I was lucky. After my parents died in a car crash, I wasn't sent to a foster home. I was taken in by family friends Linda and Charles Hale. They smiled through every interview, told neighbors they were doing the right thing. And for a while, I believed them. I was 5 too small to notice the difference between kindness and charity. They gave me a tiny room at the end of the hall, painted pale yellow, like it might make up for the size. I got Monica's old clothes, Ethan's cracked textbooks, and a reminder that I should be grateful. "You're part of this family now," Linda would say, her voice tight with virtue. "Remember we saved you." Even then, I understood it wasn't love, it was a favor they never let me forget. The Hale house always looked perfect from the outside. White shutters rose, bushes trimmed to military precision, a driveway where Charles's luxury cars gleamed under morning light. Inside, though, the air was stiff. Every compliment had a price. Every family dinner felt like a performance. They prayed before meals, thanked God for blessings, then spent the rest of the evening measuring who deserved them more. Monica, 5 years older, was the star they built their world around. She had straight-A grades, designer shoes, and a laugh that could flip from charming to cruel in a heartbeat. Ethan, the middle child, followed her like a shadow. And me, I was the quiet one at the far end of the table, careful not to scrape my fork too loud. The only person who treated me like I belonged was Margaret Hale Charles's mother. She was in her 70s when I met her, sharp as glass and twice as clear. She built Hale and Cumbie Pharmaceuticals from nothing, made her first million before Linda finished college. But she never acted like money made her better. She'd show up on Sundays with a box of pastries and that piercing, assessing look. "You read much, Violet?" she asked me once. I nodded. Good. People who read learn how to survive quiet rooms. She was the only one who noticed the quiet. By the time I turned 28, I'd moved into a small apartment downtown and started my own design studio. It wasn't much, one desk, one computer, a view of a brick wall, but it was mine. I'd stopped waiting for the Hale family to see me. Still, I kept visiting Margaret. She'd call me her sensible granddaughter, and for a few hours, her living room felt like safety. Then Monica announced her celebration dinner, a victory party for a business deal. She posted the invite in the family group chat, the one I was still somehow in. "Everyone's coming," she wrote. The photo attached showed a glittering restaurant and a caption, "Family only." I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over my phone. Then I typed, "Should I still come?" and hit send. No one replied. The silence in that group chat stretched for days. No response, not even a polite emoji. Just seen. I told myself it didn't matter that I'd gotten used to being invisible. But every time my phone buzzed, a small part of me hoped it would be them, saying something kind, something normal. It never was. 3 nights before the dinner, Linda called not to invite me, but to remind me about the dress code. "Monica's booked a private dining hall," she said, cheerful in that rehearsed way of hers. "Everyone's wearing black and gold. You'll want to look presentable." Presentable. The same word she used when she made me redo my hair for church as a child. I said I'd be there. Her relief was audible, as if avoiding embarrassment was all that mattered. When I hung up, I stood by the window watching snow collect on the streetlights. Margaret had told me once that snow has 2 faces, soft when it falls, deadly when it piles. I understood that better now. The next day, I stopped by Margaret's home. She was sitting by the fireplace, a thick shawl around her shoulders, a mug of tea in hand. "You're quiet," she said without looking up. I told her about the dinner. She didn't ask if I wanted to go. She just nodded slowly. "Let them show you who they are," she murmured. "Sometimes that's the only gift they can give." Her words stayed with me. The night before the dinner, Monica's posts started flooding my feed, photos of gift bags, champagne bottles, designer heels lined in rows. Her caption read, "Hard work pays off. Blessed to celebrate with the best family ever." My stomach tightened. The best family ever. I almost texted her to cancel, to say I was busy, but I didn't. Instead, I took out the black dress I'd bought on clearance last year. I ironed it, repaired a loose hem, and laid it across my bed. Then I took my old leather bag, the same one I'd carried since college, and slipped in a simple silver bracelet Margaret had given me years ago. "For luck," she'd said. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory came back: birthday candles I wasn't allowed to blow out, holidays where my name was forgotten on gift tags. By morning, the decision felt final. "I'm going," I whispered to my reflection. "Not for them, for me." The restaurant glowed like it was built to impress. Warm, light white linen, the faint scent of truffle oil in the air. I arrived a few minutes early, clutching my small purse tighter than I meant to. A hostess smiled politely. "Party for Hale?" she asked. I nodded. When I reached the table, they were already there. Monica in gold silk, Ethan scrolling his phone, Linda and Charles laughing too loud. For a second, no one looked up. Then Monica turned, her lips curving just enough to sting. "Oh, Violet, you made it," she said, as if surprised I'd found the courage. "Of course," I answered, keeping my voice calm. "Wouldn't miss it." The hostess tried to add a chair, but Monica stopped her. "It's okay. She can sit at the end." I felt the heat rise up my neck. Margaret was the only one who objected. "No," she said firmly. "She'll sit next to me." Her tone silenced everyone. I smiled at her, grateful, and took my seat. Dinner began. Dishes arrived like choreography: lobster tails, filet mignon, glasses of wine I didn't order. I kept quiet, cutting my food into small, forgettable pieces. Across the table, Monica launched into a speech about her big deal, how she'd closed a partnership worth millions. Charles beamed proud. Linda dabbed her lips, saying, "That's our girl." When there was a pause, I spoke. Actually, I began softly. I just signed my biggest client yet, a national campaign. The words hung in the air, fragile but real. I waited for a simple, "That's great." Instead, Linda smiled without looking at me. "That's nice, dear," she said, turning to Monica again. "Now tell us more about your deal." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was enough. The same tone, the same dismissal I'd grown up with. I focused on Margaret. She was quiet, her fork, untouched eyes moving from face to face. Her jaw tightened, though she said nothing. When dessert arrived, Monica raised her glass. "To family, real family," she said, staring directly at me. The others echoed, "To family." My throat burned. I took a sip of water, hands steady, even as my heart hammered. Somewhere inside, something finally shifted. Not a snap, but a slow, certain break. "I'm fine," I whispered to myself. "Just fine." The laughter around the table didn't sound human anymore. It was the sharp, empty kind people use to prove they belong. I stared at my glass, watching the reflection of the chandelier ripple across the water. Then Monica's voice cut through it again, sweet and venomous. "This table's for real family, not for foster beggars." The room went quiet for half a breath, then exploded with chuckles and smirks. Even Linda laughed the same high, nervous sound she used when pretending everything was fine. Charles didn't look at me. Ethan mumbled something under his breath, but I couldn't make it out. My cheeks burned, but I kept my head high. My voice didn't work, and maybe that was for the best. I pressed my napkin into my lap, careful, deliberate. Every muscle in my body screamed to leave, but leaving would mean they'd won. The waiter came by with a tight smile. "Will there be anything else?" Monica waved her hand. "Just the check, please." He returned a moment later and placed the leather folder in front of me. I blinked, thinking it was a mistake. Then Monica leaned forward, smiling wide enough for the whole restaurant to see. "You don't mind, right? Think of it as a thank you for everything we've done for you." The words hit like a slap. I looked down. The total, $2,900, nearly a month of my rent. My fingers trembled as I traced the number. No one spoke. No one stopped her. I could have said no. I could have walked out. But instead, I pulled out my card. The plastic felt cold in my palm. The waiter hesitated, glancing between us, sensing something wrong. I nodded. When the machine beeped, it echoed in my chest. One sharp sound, one transaction for 2 decades of humiliation. I set the pen down, slid the folder back, and folded my napkin over my empty plate. "All done," I said quietly. For a few seconds, it was completely still, just forks clinking in the distance, soft jazz from the speakers. Then out of nowhere, Margaret pushed back her chair. The screech of wood against marble turned every head. "I'm done?" she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Linda laughed uneasily. "Mother, don't be dramatic." Margaret raised a hand. "No, I've watched this circus long enough." Her eyes went straight to Monica. "You, your father, your mother, you've all forgotten what decency looks like." Monica blinked, thrown off. "What are you talking about? We were just joking." "Joking?" Margaret's voice hardened. "You humiliate this girl, my granddaughter, in public, and for what?" To feel powerful for one more dinner, the color drained from Monica's face. "She's not your granddaughter." Margaret straightened her shoulders. "You're wrong. She's the only one who's ever acted like family." The table froze. Charles reached for his glass, missed it, and set his hand flat against the table instead. Linda tried to laugh again, but it broke halfway out. "I have cancer," Margaret said simply. "Stage 4. I have 6 months." The silence hit like thunder. Monica's mouth fell open. "Mom, no, save it." Margaret interrupted. "I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here for truth. I changed my will last week." She turned to me. "Violet inherits everything." The words didn't sink in at first. I thought I'd misheard. But when I looked at her, she was steady, certain. Monica shot to her feet. "You can't do that. That money belongs to this family." "Family." Margaret's eyes burned. You mean the same people who stole $700,000 from a child's trust fund? Linda's fork clattered to the table. Mother, please, I found the records, Margaret continued. Every cent Violet's parents left for her, gone. Spent on vacations, private school, new cars. You used her pain as your down payment. Charles slammed his palm down. You don't understand how expensive. I understand perfectly, she cut in. You took what wasn't yours. I sat frozen, heart racing. I hadn't known about the trust fund, hadn't known about any of it. The air thickened. Monica's lipstick trembled at the corners. Ethan stared down at his plate, silent for once. Margaret looked at me again. Take me home, Violet. That broke the spell. Monica grabbed my arm. You did this, she hissed. You turned her against us. I pulled away, my voice low but clear. I didn't have to. You did that yourself, she glared, shaking. We'll challenge it. We'll go to court. You'll get nothing. Then I'll see you there, I said. I helped Margaret to her feet. Her hand felt fragile but steady in mine. We walked past the stunned table, past the staring faces of strangers. The music seemed to fade. Outside, the night air was cold, sharp, honest. Margaret squeezed my hand. I should have done this years ago, she said softly. Inside, through the window, I could still see them. Monica red-faced and shouting, Linda holding her head, Charles waving for the waiter as if money could glue their dignity back together. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet, just clean, empty in a way that finally made room for peace. Later that week, the news broke. Headlines screamed, heiress cuts off, family leaves fortune to foster daughter. Reporters swarmed, talk shows debated whether I'd manipulated her. I stayed silent. Margaret didn't. She held a press conference sitting tall beside her lawyer. I am of sound mind, she declared, and I'm tired of watching good hearts punished for existing. The cameras flashed. She handed out folders, bank statements, trust fund records, proof of every stolen cent. And then she played the video from the restaurant. Monica's voice echoed across the speakers. This table's for real family, not for foster beggars. The room went dead silent. Margaret looked into the cameras. This is what cruelty sounds like when it thinks no one is listening. As if on cue, the doors burst open. Monica stormed in, mascara-streaked voice shaking. She's lying. Violet used her. We raised that girl out of pity. She owes us. Reporters gasped. Cameras turned. Margaret tilted her head. Did you just say she owes you? I mean, she... Monica stammered, realizing too late. The lawyer leaned forward. You just admitted it. On record. The clip hit the internet before nightfall. 20 million views by morning. The comments weren't kind. Imagine saying that on camera. Justice served in real time. By the time the trial came, public opinion had already chosen sides. The judge ruled the will valid, the trust fund stolen, the restitution owed. Margaret's decision stood. I didn't celebrate. I just sat beside her in the courtroom as she squeezed my hand again, whispering, You see, silence works when truth is loud enough. A month later, she was gone. At her funeral, I placed a single white rose on her casket, the same color as the tablecloth from that night. For a moment, I closed my eyes and heard that same sharp beep from the credit card machine, but this time it didn't sting. It sounded like a door closing and another one opening. The world moved fast after the verdict, but I didn't. I stayed in Margaret's house, the one with the wide porch and the lemon trees she loved. It felt strange at first, living in silence that didn't hurt. The air smelled like her perfume and old books. Every morning I made tea the way she did, 2 sugars, no milk. Charles was sentenced to 3 years for financial fraud. Linda sold their house to cover legal fees, then vanished from the city pages. Ethan's loan surfaced. His fiancée left. Monica lost her business after that viral clip became an internet cautionary tale. Every brand cut ties overnight. Reporters tried to get a statement from me. I never gave one. There was nothing left to say. Justice, once it arrives, doesn't need an encore. I focused on work, then on something bigger. Using part of the inheritance, I started the Margaret Foundation, a program for foster and adopted kids who'd been cheated or silenced. We funded lawyers, therapy, tuition, everything I once needed, but never had. The first check I signed felt heavier than money. It felt like redemption. A year later, an application came across my desk, Monica Hale requesting assistance for financial hardship and mental health support. I read every word. She wrote that she'd lost everything, that she was sorry, that she wanted a second chance. For a moment, I thought about approving it. Then I remembered her voice at that table, how the laughter felt slicing through me like glass. I stamped the file, denied, and slid it aside. Some victories are quiet. Mine was. That night, I lit a candle for Margaret and whispered, "We did it." The flame flickered once steady and bright like she'd heard me. I visit her grave every Sunday. The grass grows fast there, soft against the marble, and the city noise fades just enough to think. I tell her about the foundation, about the kids we've helped, 200 and counting. Sometimes I imagine her smiling, that small knowing smile, the one that meant she'd already seen the ending before I lived it. People still ask if I forgave them. I tell them forgiveness isn't freedom, boundaries are. Family isn't who raised you. It's who never made you pay for a seat at the table. If you've ever had to fight to be seen, share your story in the comments. And hit subscribe. Someone out there might need to hear yours next.